Welcome to the April 8th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. We are live on Channel 27 and as well as interpretation and Pacific Coast TV. Those that want to speak have 3 minutes to speak and can be, we'll take the attendees here in the audience first and then go to Zoom. I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So
thank you, Bridget.
Yeah.
I'll call the meeting to order and invite everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have a roll call, please, Bridget?
Yes. Commissioner Rems? Here. Commissioner Gossett?
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez?
I am present.
Vice Chair Gorn?
And here.
And Chair Reddick?
Here.
All planning commissioners are present this evening.
At this point, we invite members of the public to address the commission on anything whatsoever other than items on our agenda tonight, either in person or on Zoom.
I see no one raising their hand on Zoom or in the room.
All right. Well, we won't open public hearing at that point. We'll go to item number 1A, which is our study session on coastal development permit findings. Marlene, are you to lead that for us, I think, from the city attorney's office?
Yes. Okay. So good evening, commissioners. Marlene Dalinger, Deputy City Attorney for City of Half Moon Bay. Tonight is our last installment of a series of study sessions that we've been doing for the Planning Commission about Planning Commission role and decision making and the planning process. And I'll be doing a short presentation tonight focusing on findings requirements for coastal development permit approvals, with a focus on findings related to local coastal land use plan consistency and related principles. So my focus is going to be on coastal development permits. I'm going to touch on topics that are relevant to other types of approvals or determinations that might come before the Planning Commission. So just a list of topics here that will come up: discretionary versus ministerial approvals, requirements for making findings generally, and then some specific information on findings required for coastal development permit approvals, looking at determinations of general plan or local coastal land use plan conformance, and then also I'll say a few words about conditions of approval for coastal development permits. So first, looking at discretionary approval. So sort of big picture, looking at coastal development permits, many of your meetings, if not most, include project applications or a determination on a project seeking a coastal development permit. And in chapter 18.20 of the city's municipal code, that chapter sets out the process and requirements for considering and approving or denying CDPs. And I'll get into the specifics of those approvals, but first I want to just say that this type of consideration, a coastal development permit approval, is an example of a discretionary approval. What is a discretionary approval? So discretionary approvals are ones that involve deliberation and application of judgment. These are approvals where the commission is tasked with evaluating a project against the city's adopted requirements and determining whether the project meets those standards. If a project does meet the requirements, the commission makes findings of conformance with city requirements or places conditions on the project and approves it, or it makes findings of non-conformance with the city's requirements and denies the project. So those are the pathways. But city requirements that apply to discretionary project approvals often use subjective language. and therefore they require applying subjective judgment and interpreting the language of a policy to determine whether a project complies with it. A different type of approval are ministerial approvals. These generally don't come to the Planning Commission. These are ones where a city sort of review is essentially applying a checklist or clear objective requirements with fixed standards or measurements to a project. These types of approvals are often issued at a staff level. That's the case in Half Moon Bay, as it is in other cities. So building permits and seeking a permit for an ADU are sort of examples of ministerial approvals. Okay. So looking at, again, how this applies to coastal development permit approvals, most development in Half Moon Bay requires a coastal development permit unless there's some specific exemption, exempting a project from needing one. And the city's code requires that a CDP be approved or conditionally approved after the Planning Commission makes specific findings. And I'll be, on the next slide, be showing you what those categories of findings are. But first want to say, make some big picture points about findings. So when a Planning Commission decides whether to approve or deny a project, it needs to, based on whether it meets city requirements, the decision needs to be supported by findings. And findings are written explanations of why the Planning Commission determined that a project does or does not comply with the city's requirements. And findings show how the commission applied evidence presented to reach a final conclusion about whether to approve or deny the project. And some language you might hear that comes from a well-known case, the Topanga Association for a Scenic Community case, says, or sets out a standard here. It says that findings expose the agency's mode of analysis and bridge the analytic gap between the evidence presented and the agency's ultimate decision. And so they essentially explain how the commission got from point A to point B in its decision-making, and findings need to be supported by evidence in the record. And evidence looks like public testimony, information in the agenda packet, information in a staff report, or communications from the public. So for CDPs, the city's code at section 18.20070 has a list of 6 different categories of findings that need to be made in order to approve a CDP. So I'll be focusing on this first one, which is findings of conformance with the local coastal program. But there also need to be findings of consistency with the city's growth management system, which is Measure D, conformance with the city's zoning, also a finding that there are adequate services for the project, so adequate infrastructure. For projects that are located between the sea and the first public road, there needs to be a finding that the project conforms with public access and public recreation requirements in the Coastal Act. And there's also findings related to design review criteria, so that the architectural and site design standards laid out in the city's code were satisfactorily addressed for the project. And so when you review your agenda packets for a project seeking a CDP, you'll see documents attached to the staff report that refer to these findings in a few places. So the first is in the draft approval resolution, assuming the staff is recommending approval for a particular project. There will be a mention of the findings there. So I have an example here from a project in 2022. It was a mixed-use project on Main Street. So this is kind of standard format, but there's a finding that the Planning Commission has made the required findings for approval of the project that are set forth in Exhibit A to the resolution. And then this again is kind of a standard format. The Exhibit A to the CDP approval resolution has categories that correspond to those 6 different sections in the city's code of findings. The first one being conformance with the city's local coastal program. So again, this is an example from that same project, or this is the findings from that same mixed-use project, and it calls out different relevant policies from the city's local coastal land use plan, and then has statements of conformance, which are sort of staff's proposed findings in support of conformance. So just more text from that. Some of the policies, so this is an example from that same project. Some of the policies from the city's LUP have pretty objective language. So they have specific concrete requirements, they're mandatory requirements for conformance, and determining a project's consistency with those types of LUP policies is pretty straightforward. So for this example requires that, or this policy requires that development has municipal water and sewer services and access from streets. That's a pretty easy determination to make, and so the compliance determination here explains why that is the case. And so there's essentially less discretion involved, less sort of judgment and deliberation probably required to determine conformance with a policy like this. And then some policies have more subjective language. So this again is an example from that same project. And so these types of policies have more sort of amorphous, subjective language where the policy or the plan itself doesn't provide a formula or defined criteria for determining whether a proposed project complies with the criteria. So this, the example here is of the Heritage Downtown policy from the LUP. It's, so rather than using language like this other one, it says require that all new development has available municipal water sewer services. It says preserve and enhance the architecture, landscape, and scale of the downtown and visual resource area. It says design review shall consider compatibility with scale, continuity in building lines, et cetera, maintaining, avoiding demolition of older existing buildings. So there's things to consider, but it's not, there's not clear criteria maybe for how this might be applied. So there's some helpful guidance from courts about interpreting conformance with subjective general plan policies like these. And this has come up in cases where there have been legal challenges asserting that a city council or a planning commission erred in finding that a project conforms to a general plan policy that has sort of more amorphous language. And so courts have explained that determining consistency with subjective general plan policies like this often involves weighing conflicting evidence, and that the decision-making body has broad discretion in evaluating conformance with a policy like this. So here's some language from a recent case from 2021, the Old East Davis Neighborhood Association v. City of Davis case, where the court said, because policies in a general plan reflect a range of competing interests, the governmental agency must be allowed to weigh and balance the plan's policies when applying them, and it has broad discretion to construe its policies in light of the plan's purposes. And so sort of a summary of the second point up there is sort of a summary of key points from the case, where the court emphasized that when a general plan policy uses sort of amorphous subjective language that doesn't have objective criteria for determining if a proposed project complies, the decision-making body really is looking at more subjective measures and weighs conflicting evidence and balances various factors in determining compliance. And actually the policy that was the subject of this City of Davis case was pretty similar to the one here in the city's local coastal land use plan about sort of development in a downtown and building scale and maintaining city character. And the city, or the court said, the city really has a fair amount of discretion in looking at the different values it's balancing and finding conformance. And so just the points that I've gone over so far illustrate how the different parts of a public hearing fit together in the Planning Commission's decision-making process. So you receive a staff presentation on an item along with a staff report and supporting materials. There's public testimony, which is, adding evidence to the record for you to consider. You have the opportunity to ask questions of staff to better understand the project and how it meets the city's requirements. And then you have a chance to deliberate and sort of to weigh how a project meets the city's requirements. And then just one final point. This is, okay, I've covered that, about conditions for CDP approval. So this came up on an earlier slide, which this was about findings for CDP approval. So it says local conformance with local coastal land use plan. It says the development as proposed or as modified by conditions conforms to the local coastal program. And then there's another section of the city's code that specifically speaks to CDP conditions. So it says the approving authority, which in this case would be, we're talking about the Planning Commission determinations, says the approving authority may apply conditions to a coastal development permit as necessary to ensure conformance with and implementation of the local coastal program. And so, as you know, this is most recommended CDP approvals have an attached exhibit with conditions, proposed conditions of approval that come after the findings. A lot of these are standard conditions of approval that the city applies to, I think, most projects of particular categories. But in some cases, something for the Planning Commission to keep in mind, that if you are proposing adding a condition of approval to a particular project, you want to be able to articulate, this is not going back, but how adding that condition helps the project conform to particular LCP policies. So that's the standard here. It may apply conditions to a permit as necessary to ensure conformance with the local coastal program, so that they're tethered to a particular part of the LCP. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions.
Well, thank you, Marlene.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions for Commissioner Hernandez?
As we weigh the evidence, how important is case history and precedent as we think about policies? Can you give us a framework for thinking about case history or precedent for previous decisions?
I think that's something that's good to keep in mind. I don't know if it's something you're necessarily bound to, because city priorities could change over time. The pattern of development could change over time, or maybe state law changes over time, where there's a different maybe policy focus coming from the state too. But I think it's something that is helpful to keep in mind, but not necessarily something that you're strictly bound to. But I think it sort of speaks to thoughtfulness and sort of applying principles of fairness to projects.
Commissioner Rems, you had a question?
I'll say the question. I have a couple, if you don't mind.
Oh, please.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind. One being in the policies that you outlined. Mm-hmm. Do you use a substantial conformance policy or test for that? Or is it just kind of a hit and miss, whether or not it's in compliance with that recommendation or policy?
Well,
am I making sense there?
it is. I wouldn't say there is, as far as I know, a standard that says if the project substantially complies is fine. But a lot of the policies, as I outlined, are when you start looking at the CDP policies with this question of how objective are they and how subjective, many are quite subjective or use language like consider or rather than maybe requiring something or saying that a project shall do something. So I think that sort of built into that language is that type of discretion. But if you are looking at a policy that has really sort of objective standards that says, for example, a development may be no more than 3 stories or must be between, of a certain size or height, there isn't that same sort of flexibility there.
There's broad discretion, though, to.
Pardon?
There's broad discretion in implementing that policy, though, isn't there?
In implementing,
A policy.
I'd say if it's subjectively worded, that's the case. If something is objective and concrete, there is sort of less discretion involved in applying it.
Maybe 2 more questions, if you don't
Sure.
mind. This has to do with conditions of approval for a project. Are they negotiable by the applicant?
I'll turn to staff to talk to how that typically works, how they're typically formulated.
So that's a great question, actually. So in the permitting process, when we're working with applicants, we're typically working upfront with an applicant to develop a project that does conform to our policies so that we don't have to introduce new special conditions as a way to approve a project. Occasionally, we can't do that, and so we will include a new special condition in an approval. And in that case, maybe it's the result of a failed negotiation with an applicant, but it may just be something that has to happen in a certain order that events have to happen, and this thing happens, say, after they've submitted their application and received their building permit. I can't think of what that thing would be right now. So yeah, usually there's some negotiation, but it's not really negotiating about a condition. It's negotiating to bring the whole project into conformance with our policies. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on that, then does the commission here have authority, as you mentioned, to impose a condition, but can we actually modify a condition if we review it and also discuss it?
Yeah, if it meets the rules that Marlene just explained, that that it's part of implementing the policy in whatever plan we're looking at, the local coastal plan, and if this is where case law comes in a little bit. If it's roughly proportional to whatever impact you're trying to mitigate, and there's a substantial nexus there. So you can't just throw in any old condition. You have to create the relationship between the impact you're trying to mitigate and the condition itself. So yes, you can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Vice Chair Gorn, no? Well, thank you again, Marlene. If you're able to share those slides, I'd love to have a copy.
Certainly,
Thank you.
yes.
The next item we have is a coastal development permit for the modifications to be made to the building at 334 Parisima Street. Scott Phillips, I believe you'll lead us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ruddick and members of the Planning Commission. I'll be presenting this evening on the use change on Parisima Street. And this slide shows the aerial photograph of the site, sort of highlighted in green there, of 334 Parisima Street. And just to give you a sense of the overview of the neighborhood, There are some other commercial uses along the sort of the east side or west side of Parisma Street, including a garden supply store / residential mixed use just to the south, and then a automotive repair place to the north. The other surrounding properties include single-family residences, and then the farthest left-hand corner there is the Millrose Inn. So predominantly residential, but some mixed use and commercial, industrial. And then across the street we have Zabala House that was recently converted from the bed and breakfast to apartments. Now, just a little overview on my presentation. I'll give some background on the history of the property, a little bit more on the project description and what's being proposed tonight, permits requested, and then a little overview of the plans. The architect that prepared the plans is here this evening also, so I'm happy he's here in person. Okay, a little background. In 1980, I was 5 years old at the time, a building permit was issued to allow the construction of the subject building for the purposes of establishing an auto body repair business. And then with that, the city did require substantial street improvements to that portion of Parisma, which was constructed, and the building slightly smaller than what exists on the site was built. Now, back in 1980, a use permit was not required, so that we did not have that requirement in our zoning code at the time. So fast forward a little bit to 1995. The Planning Commission approved a site design permit to allow for roughly 1,000 square foot addition in the back of the building for the purposes of sort of adding on to the auto body business to create primarily to allow for a auto body spray paint booth in the back there. So 1995. And that was constructed. The site plan we actually had that on file at the city, which is great. Kind of get a sense of what was approved as far as the frontage improvements with the original building as well as the addition. And the staff report noted that there was a condition of approval that the Planning Commission added, requiring any change of use for the addition would need to come back to the Planning Commission. Now, a question came up as to why this condition was not carried over into the draft resolution that's before you this evening. And the reason for that is that 1995, we didn't have the use tables in our zoning code that we have today. Which, based off the research we've done, it looks like the use tables were codified in 1996. So this addition was approved in 1995 by the Planning Commission. Roughly a year or so later, comprehensive update to the zoning code added use tables to the commercial downtown chapter 1807, which identifies uses that are allowed by right, for example, a t-shirt shop or visitor serving use in downtown, or a conditional use, which requires the issuance of a use permit before the use can be established. For example, the use that's proposed this evening. So conditional use requiring a use permit approved by the Planning Commission before it can be implemented. That was not the case back in 1995. Planning Commission approved a site design permit. So this was, before this comprehensive zoning code update. Now, a little bit more on the project description. A change of use from auto body repair to industrial storage is proposed, as well as creating 2 separate tenant spaces within the existing building. So demising wall would be constructed to sort of cordon off the northern portion of the building to allow for a second tenant. Now, the owner that recently purchased the property Coincidentally, his name is Gino, not related to the Gino auto body repair of yesterday, yesteryears. But he would like to establish his locksmith business in the sort of southern portion of the building, and then take on a second tenant that would like to store construction material there, and sort of have a home base for his construction business. And I believe the second tenant is logged in this evening. Now, a couple other exterior changes, minor improvements to the frontage as well as front facade, including doors, windows, re-roofing the mansard roof in a standing seam metal, as well as a new landscape strip with required bicycle rack to meet our bike parking requirements. And the amount of improvements going in does trigger ADA, Americans for Disability Act improvements. So you'll, a van accessible parking space as well as accessible bathrooms, restrooms would be added as part of this project. Now, since the change of use and additional tenant space meets the definition of development in the coastal zone, a coastal development permit is required. And I've touched upon the reasons why a use permit is required, and that's the primary reason why this project is before the Planning Commission this evening, is because of the conditional use that's being requested. Now, the minor facade changes and site improvements does require meeting the architectural review findings. Normally, this is more of a staff level type, remodel type improvements. Now, just a little bit on the plans. This slide shows the proposed site plan. You'll notice the ADA parking space up front. 4 off-street parking spaces that would be uncovered, as well as one, service vehicle per tenant space that could be stored inside the building. The broken lines there indicate where the new walls would go, but I'll show you a floor plan also. This is sort of a zoomed-in version of the frontage improvements with the new landscaping strip on the side. The new bike rack would be in sort of the bottom end of the landscape strip. Now this slide shows the existing front elevation. Notice that there's one roll-up door and sort of the rock wainscoting, sort of garden strip along the front there. And then just very basic entry door. The new owner would like to sort of refresh the front facade by removing the rock siding and garden strip, and then continue the stucco to the bottom, add an additional roll-up door, modify the existing roll-up door and front door, add new windows and gooseneck lighting, and then replace the roofing material on the mansard roof with standing seam metal, as you can see here. Additionally, the trash the dumpsters that are now stored outside would be stored inside the tenant spaces, which would certainly improve the look and feel of this portion of Purisima Street. Now, additionally, there's actually an opening on the side. Previous owner accessed the paint booth by the side through an easement along the property to the north. The new owner would like to close in that sort of opening just by extending the existing wall. Now this slide shows the existing floor plan, just basically one fairly large space in there right now. And then this is the proposed floor plan showing the tenant space B to the right and tenant space A to the left there, with the new demising wall and then the new extended wall on the right. I tried to sort of highlight the new walls with green there. Okay, an overview on, sort of the key things for the Planning Commission to consider is, compliance with our local coastal program, including our land use plan and implementation plan, and then the California Environmental Quality Act. Now, there are LUP policies that support commercial services in the town center, and given that the new owner would like to establish his locksmith business in one space, and then the general contractor sort of creating a home base for his business out of the tenant space B, we really feel that those would provide two services to not only residents of Half Moon Bay, but visitors alike, as far as, vacation rentals as well as, long-term tenants. And then also new development requirement findings. There are services available to the site. Now, as far as the commercial downtown development standards, for commercial buildings, a zero lot line is allowed, which this building meets, and a topo and boundary survey was prepared just to verify that the building doesn't encroach into the neighboring properties or anything like that. So we were happy about that. And then the maximum height is 36 feet in the commercial downtown. The existing building is just over 22 feet. So it certainly meets the maximum allowed height. 4 off-street parking spaces are provided on the proposed site plan, which is the minimum required, and then the additional 2 service vehicle parking spaces on the inside. Now, this would be, there would not be customer interface with either of the businesses. This is really more of a industrial storage and sort of a home base for the 2 businesses. But that is something that's allowed with the issuance of a use permit. And regarding CEQA, the project is categorically exempt since it, changes of uses are typically exempt from CEQA. Now, as far as noticing, within a couple of days after the architect submitted an application, we posted the site. I also personally walked and chatted with both neighbors just to get a sense of what their thoughts were with the new uses, and they were generally supportive and enthusiastic about the paint booth going away. That there was always a little bit of concern, especially I guess with when they would spray clear coat, you could, even with the filtering, you could still smell the paint, and so there was some excitement about that. Once we scheduled the Planning Commission meeting, we posted the site again with sort of some beneficial images from the plans. We mailed notices with sort of the excerpt from the plans to all the neighbors within 300 feet. We also published a legal notice in the San Mateo Daily Journal. And we didn't receive any comments from, any residents or anything. Now, we did have a couple of comments from the Planning Commission. One, there was a typo in condition of approval A1, noting imperious as opposed to impervious, so we will certainly fix that. And then one extraneous condition of approval that had to do with restricting time that could, hours of operation. In this case, there is no public interface, and there's really not, any noisy activity that would take place with either of these businesses. So we recommend striking condition A7. So I'm happy to, let's see, like I mentioned, the architect and owner are both here this evening. Probably would make sense to give them an opportunity to speak. And then, I recommend opening up for public comment. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions or,
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll certainly invite the applicant team to address the commission if you care to, and then we'll take clarifying questions. That mic is on, I hope.
There we go. All right, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners and Scott. My name is Bill Mahar. I'm the architect for the project, and we have Maria and Gino Choppy here. Gino's going to be occupying the south end of the building for his locksmithing business. Scott pretty much covered everything that we are planning for this simple little building, including updating everything for ADA from parking to restrooms to interior doors and a stairway to a new mezzanine. So I'm happy to fill in any questions that you might have about the project.
Well, thank you. Do commissioners have clarifying questions for Scott or for Mr. Meyer, the architect?
I have no questions.
No? Well, we could invite
I'm not seeing anyone. Yeah, there's no one in the audience. Online.
all right. Well, we'll invite commissioners to deliberate. I will say that I'm very supportive of the concept of industrial storage in Half Moon Bay. Last year, at different times, I had two different small businesses doing repairs to my house, and the guys, they had a couple of employees each, and they told me at the time that the one thing that would make life easier for people in their business, home repair, general construction, would be a little bit of light industrial storage somewhere in the city. They and their peers are pretty much all forced up into the harbor, to Princeton Harbor, to find space for this. So I'm have no problem with any aspect of this project, and certainly like to see us encourage storage in the city when we can.
Well, thank you for that. We try to be very complimentary with the front of the building. We spent a lot of time trying to think, well, what can we do with this to clean it up? What colors can we use? And we're actually, as a group, we're happy with the results. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Rems.
Mr. Chairman, like you, I'm very supportive of this project. I appreciate that the owners and the architect and everyone took an interest in our community to invest in the community, upgrading that neighborhood. I drove by the other day and could use a little upgrading, so I think it's going to be a nice little project, and I'm very supportive of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
I concur with my fellow commissioners and support the project. Thank you.
Commissioner Hernandez?
I like the facelift. In our community, we are nothing if not hostile to mansard roofs. So you've removed another mansard roof from our community. I don't understand the justification for that, but it seems to be a real thing here. I do like the improvement to the landscaping and encourage you to work with your immediate neighbor who owns a landscaping business. I'm sure she has some creative ideas that would enhance your project beyond your wildest imaginings. This looks like a great use. And all of my questions were answered by staff. So I'm totally supportive of this project.
Vice Chair Gorn?
I would make a motion to approve the coastal development permit, architecture review and use permit for this item.
Do we want to follow Mr. Phillips' recommendation of striking condition 7 from the resolution?
Yes, I would like to do that. Thank you.
Do I hear a second?
I will second that.
I'd like to move forward to a vote, but I just want to have one item of discussion. We've heard a number of comments from members of the community who have had projects that have been approved, either commercial projects or residential projects. And so I think it would be helpful, and this is a discussion item here, if maybe at this, we could ask city staff to provide a simple punch list or checklist for the applicant if we don't already do it, and just make it clear what their obligations are to respond to people and what the applicant's obligations are in terms of being timely. I will just comment that once we approve it here, it's like a game of tennis, and you want to keep the ball in play and moving back and forth as quickly as you can, and sometimes that's not always apparent to applicants, and feels like things can stretch out once you go past us. So anything we can do around there, I would just encourage us to make it easier for people. I know we've done a lot already, but that's just a general comment.
Thank you for that. Are we ready to vote? Well, okay, well, all those in favor of Vice Chair Gorn's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Unanimous. Thank you, folks, for being here tonight and being available. Yeah, good luck with everything. Our next item has to do with adoption of local hazard mitigation plan into the safety element.
That's me.
Okay, Director Lako.
Yeah, it's Chair Ruddick and Commissioners. I'm going to present this item to you without a slide presentation. That's actually for the next item. So no slides for me on this item. Bridget? That's for the next item. There we go. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. So we're asking the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council authorize an amendment to the general plan to incorporate the 2021 San Mateo County Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, annex for the City of Half Moon Bay, into the city's 1991 safety element of the general plan. So from here on out, I will refer to the local hazard mitigation plan, and I will refer to the city's local hazard mitigation plan. The 2021 Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan annex for City of Half Moon Bay is the City of Half Moon Bay's LHMP, Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. The way that works is the county provided all the vulnerability and risk analysis for that plan, and then each city develops their own annex with mitigation measures against the hazards, and then they adopt that. And our city council adopted our LHMP in November 15th, 2021. So, so I'll just refer to our LHMP from here on out. So the reason that we're doing this is that Senate Bill AB 2140 made it possible for local governments to receive the full amount of money that they might receive should a disaster strike. So usually the state government holds back, well, the federal government, if you receive FEMA funds, holds back 25% for the local entity to pay itself. So it's sort of, you have to pay a portion of what they give you. The state determined that they would pay 18 point, I think it was 75%, yeah. But that still leaves 6.25% for local governments to pay. So by adopting our LHMP into our safety element, we would not be responsible for that 6.25%. So that's why we're doing this. There is a cycle of updates that are required by this. So the state, in all of its wisdom, set the update schedule for safety elements every 8 years. It's triggered by the housing element. So, but the LHMP updates through FEMA are required every 5 years. So right now, we have a certified LHMP that's dated 2021. We have a safety element that's dated 1991. And we are working on an update to the safety element, but that won't be done until December 2025, should the project remain on schedule, which I do believe it is. So for now, we are asking you to recommend that City Council adopts the 2021 plan into the 1991 safety element by reference. And then when we have a new safety element, we will come back again and ask for the same thing. It's a simple matter to take care of. It could be a substantial savings that should we experience a disaster in the future. When the local hazard mitigation plan is updated, then in 2026, we'll come back again and adopt the new plan into the safety element. So we will be in this cycle of updating for a little while. So that's how that's going to work. The language that will be included in the safety element, so this is where the amendment comes in, and I'm going to actually read that language in part because I left off by reference in there, so I want to read it correctly so that it's in the safety element correctly and it ends up being in the resolution correctly. So we're adding a title, Relationship of the Safety Element to the Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. The 2021 Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan Annex for the City of Half Moon Bay is adopted by reference into the safety element and can be found in its entirety at this link, and then it has a hyperlink. The 2021 MJLHMP Part B Annex for the City of Half Moon Bay was developed in accordance with the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 and followed FEMA's Local Hazard Mitigation Plan guidance. The MJLHMP incorporates a process similar to that used for the safety element, where hazards are identified and profiled. The people and facilities at risk are analyzed, and mitigation actions are developed to reduce or eliminate hazard risk. The implementation of these mitigation actions, which include both short and long-term strategies, involve planning, policy changes, programs, projects, and other activities. So that would be the amendment to the safety element. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Director Lako. Are there questions for the director? Commissioner Rems?
I was a little confused when I was reading this over the weekend. I thought there was a physical structure called the annex to the city. And I'm learning now that it's a document that's being incorporated into. So what I'm going to suggest is for slow people like me, that perhaps somehow we can define these terms as we're going along somewhere. Because I thought it was like a building down the street that took the overflow from staff, and maybe there's too much staff in it, you know, it was reassigned down the street.
There was, though, at one point, so maybe that is confusing.
So
Did you-
Bridget is saying there was at one point an annex, a physical annex in the city.
Mr.
I did not
Chairman, I
realize
rest my
that.
case.
But I understand your point, and I will strive to explain things more clearly.
I'd echo.
I don't think it was you. It was in the documents that I was reading, and it kept saying annex, annex, and I said, I wonder where this is, you know? I'd like to go see it. And how many people are there? So,
Yeah,
anyway, that's-
I hear you,
that was my
Commissioner
problem.
Rams.
Sorry, thank you.
Sure, there is a certain amount of jargon in this business. For instance, I wasn't familiar with the by reference term until encountering it here. And in fact, if you wanted to explain that to me, I'd be happy to be smarter about it.
So by including by reference, we're referring to the link to the plan that resides on our website rather than attaching it like as an attachment to the general plan or an appendix to the general plan. So that would be incorporating the whole thing into the general plan, and we're doing this by reference, which is also allowed under AB 2140.
Thank you for that. Other clarifying
I
questions?
do have a question. So I'm unclear on just like kind of why we're doing this. So has Half Moon Bay been paying 6.25% of all the disaster relief money?
I don't know what we've paid in the past. If we receive disaster money from FEMA, we would be paying that 6.2% of that, yeah.
And so this bill, that AB 2140, hopes to reverse that for local governments, and it hopes to have the state legislature assume that 6.25, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So first, the state passed the, California Disaster Assistance Act, I think, CDAA, through which they took on the 18.75% of that 25% that the feds have us pay. And then through this process, we get rid of the extra 6.25%.
So doesn't this AB 2140, where it asks on approval from the state legislature, it's going to change that 6.25% and have the state absorb it. So what does that have to do with adopting this plan into the safety element? I don't actually understand.
That is the requirement.
It's a requirement.
So, yeah, that's what AB 2140 does. It says, adopt your local hazard mitigation plan into your safety element, and you get this extra 6.25%.
I thought you said it was optional?
It is optional. So we don't have to do that, and we could pay the extra 6.25%.
So if we don't do it,
Should
we pay 6.25%. Is that correct?
Say that again?
If we don't do this, then we pay 6.25%?
Yes.
Okay, then.
But it is optional. You don't have to do it. It just
No, I
makes
understand.
fiscal sense.
That is news to me. Thanks.
Commissioner Gossett?
So if we ask the city council to adopt it, is it guaranteed that they'll pay the 6.25%?
It is not guaranteed, but we have a much better chance.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Are there any additional strings attached with this? Is there anything else, I mean, that we're taking on as an obligation that's not apparent to me from the staff? I mean, I didn't see anything in the staff report, but, sometimes federal funding or adopting San Mateo County's plan could come with unintended consequences. Is there anything that city staff have looked at as, we should think about this?
First, we're not adopting San Mateo's plan. We've already adopted our annex, which is our LHMP. And we're just incorporating it into our safety element by reference. There's no strings attached. The purpose of AB 2140 is really a carrot to get jurisdictions to align their safety elements and their local hazard mitigation plans. And as we approach, the safety element update, we are working on that alignment. So the safety element update is a similar process to the local hazard mitigation plan update where the county took the lead. They are doing all of the vulnerability assessment, and then each city is going to develop their own policies for their own safety elements.
Did you have another clarifying question, Rick?
I'm just confused by the link to the multi-jurisdictional LHMP in the staff report, and so I'm just trying to reconcile that. So, I don't have another question at this time.
Commissioner Gossett?
Through the chair, thank you. I did go through the link. It was the second link, and I noticed that there was a lot of outdated information in there. And so the question I have is, especially with like some of the hazard maps that were in the plan, in the annex, I guess that's what I should call it, not the plan. So the question I have is, why would we recommend to City Council to adopt an outdated plan with, inaccurate hazard maps? That's my question. Why wouldn't we wait until it's updated? Or is it too soon to update it? Because even like the team that is listed as part of the annex, I think some of the folks don't even work here anymore. So there's a lot of inaccuracies within the annex.
So that, we already adopted that plan. That is our plan. So we're not adopting an old plan. We've already adopted it, and we've been living with it for since 2021. And yeah, the team that originally worked on that is the team that's listed on that cover page. And I think the only person that I saw that's still here was Lisa Rossi. But that's the team that worked on it. We can't change those names. And really the reason for doing it is in case we have a major disaster. It just, if you have a major disaster and, oh shoot, I'm sorry, I just set myself up to do math. So if you get $1 million from FEMA, then that 6.25% is 62, thank you. I'm sorry. So that's a pretty significant amount of money. So.
Commissioner Rems?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarifying question, Madam Director. If I heard you correctly, we're going to have 3 shots at this between now and probably December. Does that, and maybe you could clarify that, and at each step, do we have the option to opt in or opt out at that point?
Yep.
So the action we take today will only be good till the next action that we take.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Further clarifying questions? Commissioner Hernandez?
So just to clarify, our annex is this multi-jurisdictional LHMP document that is on our website. It includes other communities, but we've adopted it as our annex.
No, only the title have, so if you, I wonder if I have that open on my, I think I might. So if you go to the table of contents for the multi-hazard plan, sorry, mine's taken a while to load here.
I think- yeah.
And you click on the City of Half Moon Bay's annex, that is what we adopted.
It starts on page 355 of 11,000 pages. 1,100 pages, not 11,000, 1,100.
Yeah.
And the link in the document takes us to the Long Range Planning General Plan 2021, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So when I open those up, that's what I see. So I'm just, there's a lot to, as Commissioner Gossett points out, a lot to thresh through there. So,
Yeah, and that's true, and I recognize that it's confusing. They don't pull out one section of the plan and just call it yours. In part because even though what we adopted is our mitigation measures and our annex within the plan, the first part of the plan provides a lot of the context for that, the vulnerability assessment and the risk analysis. So you don't really want to have them separated necessarily in order to understand all the mitigation measures that we adopted as our annex.
so our annex is a specific subsection called out on page 330-something,
355.
just to be clear.
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Of course.
I just have one more question. So this seems sort of ministerial. Why are we doing this? Because, I mean, if you tell me that we are in the running for 6.25% more, more share of hazard funds, that's great. But I guess I'm wondering, why does Planning Commission and City Council have to do this? Can you explain?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because there's something happening there.
Why are we hearing this? Like, explain, I just don't get it. So
Yeah.
I could see, okay, we could approve that, sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't really do anything, but why?
The process for complying with AB 2140 lays out exactly this process. You have to bring a resolution to the Planning Commission. They recommend to the City Council, and then the City Council approves, or disapproves for that matter. And that's laid out in their process, yes. It does seem like it could be ministerial, but that's not how the state wanted it.
But
Thank you.
As a general principle, if we want to update our safety element, the process would be to go to the Planning Commission, ask for a recommendation, and then go to City Council, right?
Yes.
So it's the same process we would follow for any update to our safety element.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, exactly.
Great, thank you.
So as a point of clarification, this has already been adopted by the City Council in 2021. Is
You
that
are correct.
Okay, but not by reference to the safety element. And that's the action we're taking tonight?
Yeah, the action we're taking tonight is to sort of link it to our safety element, to use a different wording. Yeah.
Which the law requires,
If you want to comply with it,
if you want to comply.
yeah.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Unless somebody has something else they want to discuss, I'd like to make a
Well,
motion.
I was going to see ask Bridget if there's anyone wanting to comment on this.
No, I see none.
Okay, then I won't open public hearing and go back to you.
I have no further questions. I'm happy to make a resolution to approve the item as recommended by our Community Development Director.
Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
We don't require a roll call for this either, I imagine. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion passes. All right, we are on a roll. Item 1D is general plan conformance determination for the city's property conveyance of a whole bunch of lots in North Wavecrest.
Yeah, I like how you said that. A whole bunch of lots. And now the slide is up showing all of those lots. So yes, Chair Reddick and Commissioners, this is a recommendation to adopt a resolution and make the finding that the City of Half Moon Bay's conveyance of these 21 parcels, which are located in the Wavecrest Plan Development Unit area, the conveyance from the city to the Coastside Land Trust for habitat restoration, wetland protection, trail improvement, public access recreation, that this all conforms to the Half Moon Bay's general plan, including the local coastal land use plan, which of course is the land use plan for our general plan as well. So the requirement here is that California Government Code Section 65402A requires the city to consider the sale for the intended purpose with respect to the city's general plan. So it requires that the Planning Commission consider whether or not this is consistent with our planning documents, the LUP and the general plan. In the staff report, there's discussion of various LUP policies, some that designate the Wavecrest Plan Development Area for habitat conservation and restoration, hazard avoidance, public access and recreation, and lower cost visitor serving uses, consistent with Coastal Act priorities. Those are called out to show the consistency with this land conveyance and those policies. Other policies that are called out specifically contemplate the Wavecrest Trail project. And then there's some discussion of the lot retirement program whereby other developments contribute fees, say per housing unit, so that they can be used to retire lots elsewhere for conservation and other Coastal Act priorities. So the staff report goes through a number of these policies and programs to show how this is consistent with the general plan and in particular the land use plan. And with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I had ex parte communications with the COO of Coastside Land Trust, Sarah Polgar. So I just wanted to disclose that.
Thank you for that. Are there clarifying questions for the director? Commissioner Gossett.
I would like to know, as part of the lot retirement, have the parcels been deed restricted or have easements been placed on the parcels to protect them from development into perpetuity? Did the city take that action?
Not to my knowledge. By conveying the land to a nonprofit organization with the express mission of protecting lands for conservation and public benefit, I do not believe a deed restriction would be necessary, because once conveyed to the land trust, they are obligated to use the lands for that purpose. And I'm just going to nod over at Marlene to make sure I'm correct. Okay.
Thank you.
It's a good question. Commissioner Rems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarifying question, actually probably two. In your report, it said that the parcels, the surplus parcels that you're going to transfer were acquired through a tax sale years ago, apparently. And I was just wondering if they were expensive or not expensive, and whether or not, second part of the question is whether or not there was an appraisal done for the parcels that you're going to sell, and whether there's a fair market value placed on that, or are there going to be a donation to the land trust?
I don't know what the cost of the parcels was. Do you mind bringing up that text from Matthew? Bridget's going to read, in anticipation of your question, Commissioner Rems. I did ask Matthew to weigh in, and Bridget's going to read his response about the appraisals.
He writes, we did not. We bought them out of tax default, and we negotiated this deal with a partnership. So we're donating the parcels that serve a public purpose and selling the others for the amount we paid for the parcels to return those funds back to the mitigation fund. That's all I have.
I hope that's clear enough.
So it sounds like there was no appraisal done on the parcels?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gossett.
Is the mitigation fund the lot retirement fund?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's a fair assumption.
Other clarifying questions? Commissioner Hernandez.
So the city council has already approved the transfer of the surplus properties, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I'm under the impression that when the question of surplus land went before the city council, there was a discrepancy in the legal descriptions of these properties. Has that been corrected?
I asked Marlene that today. Do you want to?
So that's correct, that there was a discrepancy in the deeds from conveying the parcels from the county to the city. For two of the deeds or two of the parcels, there was a discrepancy in the legal description for those parcels. So the city is working with the county to correct those deeds. There's a process to correct them, and our understanding is that that's underway.
Excellent. And we've already approved a CDP for the Wavecrest project, which applies to these lots. So there's no issue with, we're not approving any other project. We're just transferring the land on which a CDP has already been approved. Okay.
That's correct.
And then this is more of a general question. How much of the Pacific Ridge funding remains unspent?
Ken says about 1.4 million.
And we will return a portion of that with the sale of these properties, or we will refund, or we'll get more funds after the sale of these properties?
I assume so.
Okay, great. I have no further questions.
Any other clarifying questions? Bridget, is there anyone wanting to make public comment on this item?
No, there isn't. Nothing, no one.
Okay. Deliberations? Well, happy to have a motion in that case. If anyone wants to take a stab at it.
I would make a motion to adopt the resolution as presented by staff.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion passed. Well done. Productivity. We'll turn to Director Lako for Director's Report.
Yes. I first wanted to talk a little bit about the public comments and distribution. received a little notice from Bridget that we were sort of changing our policy, and I wanted to elaborate on that a little bit. So what we propose to do is staff tries to respond to public comments as they come in. We do that not because we're required to, but as a courtesy to members of the public and the Planning Commission. And we often get very late comments, and we are scrambling like crazy on Planning Commission Day. So we are going to respond to public comments that are submitted Monday before 3 o'clock. From thereafter, we will forward you the comments without any responses. And that's just to save ourselves from, going crazy. So we think that's a pretty fair way to do it, and it's done that way in many jurisdictions. So we will continue to forward the comments to you. When comments come in, they will be a part of the digital record. So we just won't be providing responses. So I wanted to clarify that. And do you have any questions about it?
No, I think that's a great idea.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Will you provide that in the staff reports we get that are typically issued on Thursdays, the agenda, so that it's clear to the public that we have a policy of responding to call comments written by 3 p.m.?
I think that's a great idea. It's on our website. I think we'll put that in our staff reports. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I'm working on that right now to get the language on there.
Great.
Yeah.
Just
Thank
so
you.
it's front and center so people know.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the director because on the last few meetings, I was scrambling. There were things coming in at the last minute, and we're getting text, and we're getting this, and I'm going, what's going on? How do I get to the bottom? We have to take action on it. So it's really an unreasonable expectation from those who are asking the questions at the 11th hour to expect an answer that night, unless they appear before us and lay it out for us so that we can have a dialogue or something. So I would support, I think it's reasonable what the director is saying, and I just wanted to make mention of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would hope that questions from planning commissioners received after 3 p.m. Monday wouldn't be equally burdensome with the volume that you have had to deal with from the public.
No, I think we respond to you guys whenever you reach out.
Thank you.
I mean, I hope that didn't sound disrespectful.
No, no. I appreciate all your hard work in that area.
Okay. The next item on my report is about the planning commissioner training that's coming up. So I sent the agenda, the topics for conversation. We still don't have an agenda for that. So this is the 21 Elements meeting that's on April 29th. The plan is to discuss Samtrans on Grand Boulevard Initiative, the CCAG countywide feasibility study, and the MTC Daily City bike share. As best as I could tell, the CCAG study is a countywide local roadway safety plan. So all of these items are very transportation related. So if you are especially interested in transportation topics, this would be a great meeting for you to go to. If that's not your thing, then don't worry about it. We do have a couple active grants in Public Works right now with some transportation stuff that might come forward in the next year or so. And I can't speak to how helpful this would or wouldn't be, but. The other item I have here is the permits that we've issued recently, since the last meeting. We issued a permit, a second-story addition at 427 Casa del Mar Drive. We issued an emergency coastal development permit to reroute the coastal trail at Morada Road. So if you've been, that's right near Casa Mira. If you've been there, you'll see that the trail is falling off, sloughing off onto the beach. And there's a big K-rail there keeping people from getting close. And state parks came to us, and they're going to use they want to use the trail that kind of cuts off and goes around the apartments there and then meets Marata Road and then bring people back. So right now they're doing that as a temporary fix, and then they're going to come in for a permanent solution to the problem, and the emergency permits has some specifications about what we expect when they come back. So.
Excuse me, can you tell me what they're thinking about for permanent solution?
They're thinking about the same detour, but they need to make it ADA accessible. They need to provide parking. They need to make sure that if they're going to close that one straight section of trail, that people don't end up on the trail anyways. They need to do it thoroughly.
It's a big detour.
Yeah. We also received an application for the work at the end of Kelly Street. This was something commissioners brought up, I think in January. They saw work happening at the end of Kelly. So I think I explained in an earlier meeting that was initially maintenance work, and then it turned into something bigger. Rather than do an emergency coastal development permit after the fact, we just went straight to a permanent permit, so we're working on that now. So.
Can I
And
ask
that's
a
it.
question?
Oh, yeah.
Related to the end of Kelly, as a former volleyball parent, there seems to be a lot of consternation on behalf of state parks with people parking at the end of Kelly and walking over to pick up their children or even waiting. It seems to be strongly discouraged. I'm curious why there are all those no parking signs, no waiting signs. Many people have to pay a fee to go into state parks to pick up their kids. And it seems like perhaps when you're looking at coming back to us, if somebody could give us an update on why state parks seems to be able to enforce no parking there or even no waiting at the end of Kelly. It seems like there might be a reasonable grounds for people to use that as at least a temporary waiting area, 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute, especially since the city has put temporary beach volleyball courts in that area. So it's just something I've observed.
I'll look into it. I'll report back.
Does that conclude your report, Director Lako?
That does conclude my report.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any communications?
I do, through the chair.
Commissioner Gossett?
I received a flyer today from Coastside CERT, and they are going to have a free emergency prep and response training at the Ocean View Park on May 3rd from 3 to 5 p.m. So they invite neighbors to come together to receive training on dealing with the disaster, first aid to control bleeding and shock, communicate damage conditions on walkie-talkies and radios, and practice and maintain potential life-saving skills. And I just wanted to share that with anyone who's interested to participate in that free training.
Yeah, a great organization. I'm kind of a lapsed CERT member ever since the pandemic struck. I haven't been a good CERT member. Any other communications?
I had one.
Please.
While gardening this weekend, I had the benefit of listening to 2 podcasts by Freakonomics on eliminating sludge from our lives. And it's a term they use to describe red tape and all the annoying things we experience. The second part of that podcast covers things around government And I shared that with Director Alaco. Apparently a few other people have shared it with her as well. I know that she is personally opposed to red tape and she's trying to streamline things, but I found it to be an interesting piece, both of them, and encourage folks to look at them and do what we can to wage our war on sludge, making it easier for people who have approved projects to move forward.
Freakonomics, huh?
Freakonomics, the war on sludge, parts 1 and 2.
Thank you for that.
Do you mind if I say something? I just have to
Please.
apologize for bringing you AB 2140, that massive red tape this evening.
Well, the benefit is we don't have to pay 6.25%, so that's well worth it. We're taking that hit for the rest of our community.
Are we ready to adjourn?
So moved?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. We're adjourned.